Today I'm going to talk about comedian, actor by the name of Redd Foxx. And Redd Foxx was born in 1922. He ran away from home when he was very young to be in show business. He washed dishes at supper clubs. They say he even slept on newspapers to get through to getting gigs. And he was working on the Chitlin circuit back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. The Chitlin circuit was basically a circuit of clubs and hotels that would allow black people to stay there or perform there because of racial segregation and the Jim Crow laws. And Jim Crow was a depiction, a very stereotypical depiction of black people. He eventually got very successful, and his nickname Red came from the color of his hair and his light skin. He was so vulgar. He was so funny. And it was shocking to me because I knew him as Fred Sanford from the show Sanford and Son, which is based on the British show called Steptoe and Son about Fred Sanford and his son, Lamont, who ran a junkyard in Los Angeles. And by the way, that location of the junkyard still exists in, I think it's North Hollywood or in the San Fernando Valley. And my friend Lindsay, I am not a stalker.com. She stalked it all out and took pictures of then and now. And it's a great vlog if you haven't followed it. But as I said, Redd Foxx was very funny. He was known as the Dean of X-rated comedy. And again, I thought of him as Fred Sanford, and then you listen to his comedy records, which he sold over 20 million of in his career. And they're so vulgar, so nasty, and so very, very funny. So he did hit the big time in 1972 when the American version of Steptoe and Son came out, and it was called Sanford and Son. Sanford was his birth name when he was born, and I guess Fred was named after his brother. That's what I understand. And what was neat is that Redd Foxx brought along a lot of his fellow musicians and comedians from the Chitlin circuit with him on Sanford and Son. So they were, working actors and working comics and got residuals and royalties from their appearances. I don't know how much at that point in time, but still they were working. They became almost household words. Some of them, Slappy White in particular, was brought in by Redd. And another comic who he worked with, though I'm not sure she worked on the Chitlin circuit, but LaWanda Page, who you probably remember as Aunt Esther, who was like one of the best characters ever on television. And LaWanda was another comic who was vulgar. She started as a dancer, actually, the bronze goddess of fire, believe it or not. She was quite beautiful, and they made her into, they really uglied her up for the part of Aunt Esther, the Bible thumper, which couldn't be further than LaWanda Page's comedy. She seemed like quite a not as bawdy as she is. If you get a chance and you don't mind absolute filth, listen to the album called "Watch It, Sucker," and of LaWanda Page. It's on YouTube. It's so nasty and so very, very funny. But anyway, I'll stop that. So as I said, the Jim Crow was that era brought along musicians and comedians. Sam Cooke, Aretha Franklin, Billie Holiday, B.B. King, The Supremes, Sammy Davis Jr., and Moms Mabley, Flip Wilson. They all performed on the Chitlin circuit, and they all made names for themselves in mainstream America. And the Jim Crow laws, as I mentioned, were state and local laws that enforced racial segregation from the late 1800s until the 60s. There were laws named after a black character in minstrel shows, which is so, just a bad stereotype, and it's sort of embraced by that to make a point. Now, on Sanford and Son, Fred's trademark gag on the show was,
"You big dummy, you big dummy, you big dummy."
His banter with Aunt Esther was legendary, the insults that went flying. And another thing is he played a widower, and his wife Elizabeth had passed away. If something happened and he wanted to get sympathy for himself, or get out of a situation, he'd clutch his chest and say to his wife, who was already dead,
"This is a big one. I'm dying. You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey." Oh.
And that sort of ended up being kind of an ironic twist to the way Fred died, which you're going to hear about in a moment. But Redd won a Golden Globe and 3 Emmys for Sanford and Son, and I think he owned part of the show, so he did quite well for himself by the time the show left the air in 1977. Or he quit the show, actually. The show went on, and then he came back, and the show went on more, but it never got uh, the ratings that it did during its original incarnation, its original run. And Redd always handled his money poorly. He claimed it on mismanagement, which is probably part of it, but he also lived a lifestyle. I mean, fancy cars and fancy clothes and amazing jewelry, and he pissed through a lot of his money. And he actually went bankrupt, and the IRS went after them, and they raided his house, and they took everything. They took, like he said they took his dog house. They took, I think at that point he had like 9 cars. He was living in Vegas, actually, with his fourth wife. And the building that they lived in Vegas is still there. I was there not that long ago. I forget what building it's in, but I'm actually probably showing that right now in this video. And the sign in front of it still has a red logo, which was Redd Foxx's logo, a Redd Foxx on the logo. And I thought that was a cool homage to Redd Foxx, who had that place. So he claimed again that it was alimony payments that he was paying for his first 3 wives and unpaid income taxes, and the IRS came after him. And when they said that some of the things, I read this online, they took a brown sofa with 8 pillows, a wooden water buffalo, a yellow penguin lighter, a plaque from Martin Luther King, a silver Mickey Mouse watch, 4 used hubcaps, and a ukulele. I mean, they took everything. He said they took the jewelry, the cash in his pockets, and they actually had an auction, and they auctioned all this stuff off. So by the time the 80s rolled around, Redd Foxx was looking for work. He was broke, and he was probably doing Vegas shows. He held a record for something in Vegas. I think he was the first Black person to have a residency in Vegas, or something like that. And you know what else? Redd Foxx had an office on La Brea, right near Sunset Boulevard. And I'm pretty sure the same building is there. But in front of this building, I'm rolling it right now, so you'll see it. In front of this building, in the cement, a lot of people don't know about this, is sort of like a Redd Foxx Walk of Fame. And so he brought his friends out, and it's not organized like footprints, handprints, like the Chinese theater in nice, neat squares. It was wet concrete in front of Redd Foxx's office, and he had his friends they sign it or put down their handprint or something, and probably, thousands of people walk past it a week and don't even realize that it's there. And some of the names in it was Billy Allen, Dap Sugar Willie, musician Gene the Poo Poo Man Anderson. Now, Redd himself probably had his in there at some point, and it's been a lot of the concrete has been destroyed, and so there are still some there. But like Redd Foxx and Luanda Page, who had hers, and there's a great photograph of Luanda Page doing her handprint ceremony in front of Redd's offices, and those are long gone. Now, speaking of, I just wanted to show you this. It's sort of an off-topic thing, but on topic. My friend Jane had a mom who sadly passed away, named Janet. And Jane Osborne, who is admin on the Death Hag board, if you join the Death Hag group on Facebook, Death Hags, Hollywood Death Hags, and I think there's about 25,000 members or something like that, but they're like-minded people. So if you want to check it out. Anyway, Jane's mom, who sadly passed away, Janet Brandis, gave me, when she passed away, left me a lot of things, and which was so kind of Jane to because her mom said that she wanted me to have them, so she gave me a ton of things. Her mom used to work at Pep Boys, which is an auto shop, auto parts. And still around, Pet Boys. And she would amazingly, like a historian, would save receipts from people that had purchased things there, and like Troy Donahue and LaWanda Page. And actually, this is something that I got from LaWanda Page, from Janet, regarding LaWanda Page, and she wrote stuff on the back about what day she was there and what she bought, and I believe it was auto polish, a couple of other things that I couldn't figure out what they were. But good old LaWanda Page, whose real name is Alberta Peel, just so you know. LaWanda was her stage name. Her real name was Alberta Peel, which is the name that's on her grave marker at Inglewood Cemetery. So anyway, back to Redd Foxx. Oh, you know what? Also, sorry, Redd Foxx also owned a beauty salon. I think this was 76 to 79. One of his investments was a beauty salon on Sunset Boulevard. The address was 7557 Sunset Boulevard. I've only been able to find one picture of Redd in front of the place. Just interesting note, next door to it was Rodney Bingenheimer's English Disco. And Rodney Bingenheimer was a DJ in Los Angeles who brought like David Bowie and Blondie and Go-Go's to national attention. He was well known as a person who springboarded a lot of artists to get radio play. And if you ever see the movie about Rodney, it's called The Mayor of Sunset Strip. It's very good. So Rodney Bingenheimer's English Disco was literally next door to Redd Foxx's salon, which I've only been able to find one picture of Redd Foxx in front of it, and you can't even tell the building behind it. But it's just an interesting, because at the same time, Rodney's Disco and Redd Foxx's salon were next to each other. So as I mentioned, Redd Foxx was living in Vegas, and he was looking for work in the 80s. And Eddie Murphy, who was a big fan of Redd Foxx, hired him, cast him in the film Harlem Nights. Now, the film didn't do very well, but critics agreed that Redd Foxx and his co-star Della Reese did very well. They were very likable on that show. And they decided Eddie Murphy was producing sitcoms. And they hired Redd Foxx and Della Reese to be in a sitcom together. Originally, it was called Chest Pains. This was which was actually an homage to Redd Foxx clutching his chest. I'm coming, Elizabeth. But they changed it to the royal family. So in July 1991, Redd Foxx married his fourth wife. Kaho Cho was her name, and they were living in that cool little house in Las Vegas, which is supposed to be haunted. Actually, I've heard a few people mention that Redd Foxx haunts that little house on a very busy road in Las Vegas. So, okay, back to the royal family, the TV show with Della Reese. It premiered on CBS on September 18th, 1991. So it was being filmed on the Paramount Studios lot on stage number 31. And it was October 11th, 1991, and they were rehearsing. It was Friday night. Or Friday afternoon. They were rehearsing for the show. Now, it said that at 4:10 p.m., during a brief interruption at the rehearsal, Redd Foxx made a wisecrack to the crew, and everyone kind of chuckled, and he fell to the floor. Now, understandably, everyone thought he was joking, because that was his trademark joke, was falling to the floor. And Della Reese was saying, get up, Redd, and he didn't respond. In fact, she got down to him and he said, get my wife, who was there as well. So they thought now there was some reports saying that nobody in the crew wanted to help him, because everyone was afraid that they were going to be the one that hurt Redd Foxx. Another story says that one of the security guards came in and ripped open his shirt and was doing CPR, and then doing the breath of life, the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation as well. In the meantime, Della Reese was panicking and praying over him, because she's a preacher, she's a reverend, and begged him, Redd, don't die, Redd, don't die. And so here's the thing that's kind of interesting. Redd Foxx, they say, did die on the soundstage. Like, he had no heartbeat, and he was not pronounced dead because no doctors were there. But everyone there was convinced that Redd Foxx had died. However, when paramedics arrived, they revived Redd Foxx.
And he was laying on the floor, and I leaned down to him, and I put my hands on him. He said, get my wife, get my wife. get my wife. I said, somebody get paramedics and somebody go get Mrs. Foxx. And they went and got her. And they pronounced him dead. And they put him in the ambulance, and we all got in our cars and followed him to the hospital. And he came back and stayed for 4.5 hours.
So I'm not sure he ever regained consciousness when they picked him up from the soundstage. I know that Della Reese followed in her car, the ambulance. So he was taken to Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital. His wife was in the ambulance with him, I assume, and his manager and Della Reese and the others, whoever else went, followed them at Hollywood Presbyterian, which is only about 3 miles away on Vermont Avenue. It's where Clark Gable died, and Mo Howard and Christian Brando, they all died at Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital. And Della Reese, they say, was leading prayers over him and begging him not to die. And but at 7:45 that night, he was pronounced dead. It was Friday, October 11th, 1991. He was 68 years old. Now, according to Della Reese, she claims that right at that moment, or a very, very short period afterwards, it was an inappropriate moment, the producers who were there with her and them at the hospital turned around and said, now what are we going to do with the script?
Standing this close were two of the producers, and they said, what are we going to do with the script? This script was written for Redd and Della. So who are we going to get to? Who's going to replace? She's sitting right here. They just told her that her husband was dead. And I went crazy.
Redd Foxx's funeral was held on the 15th of October, 1991, attended by over 1,000 people, they say. Della Reese gave the eulogy, and they said they were standing room only. The crowd clapped to gospel music, laughed, and occasionally cried at the funeral of Redd Foxx at the mortuary in Vegas. Now, other celebrities who attended: Slappy White, singer Joe Williams, Mike Tyson, Elvis Presley's manager, Colonel Parker. Now, Flip Wilson, they say, was there. A lot of people thought he was there, but it was actually a Flip Wilson impersonator. So that was kind of weird. That made a lot of news right after that. Della Reese said, I knew that it wasn't Flip Wilson, but I couldn't say anything then because I didn't want to cause a disturbance. But it was a Flip Wilson lookalike. I don't know if they ever figured out who that was. An interesting fact about the funeral, actually, Demond Wilson, who played Lamont, Fred's son, didn't show up for the funeral. I guess he some of the comments about him, he's a pastor or a preacher now, or last I've heard, and he said some things about Redd that were not at all nasty. He said that, we were friendly, we had a good working relationship, but they had zero relationship after that, after the show ended. So I'm not quite sure what that's all about, but Demond was very friendly about it, but quite honest about it, saying, we weren't friends, so I didn't see a reason to be there. They weren't not friends, but they just weren't friends, if that makes sense. They weren't enemies, but I just found that to be kind of interesting. And Lola Falana was there, and after the funeral procession, they led Redd's funeral procession to his graveside. And when they got there, Della, who sang, let go red balloons for Redd Foxx. Eddie Murphy paid for the funeral. I guess, because he was in debt, Eddie Murphy decided he would pay for the funeral. And he said, I had to physically pay for this funeral. This is Eddie. Buy his headstone and do all that stuff. He went on to say that Redd was not the first Hollywood celebrity he had to bury. Eddie says, I buried a lot of people over the years. For whatever weird reason, many people in show business do not have their belongings in order when they die. If you only knew how many renowned individuals we buried. If you only knew, he lamented. Regarding the Royal Family, the TV show, it continued production without Redd in it. In fact, they hired Jack Hay.
They never did treat him with the respect that he should have had. He should have had a right out of the show. But instead, they stuck Jack Hay in there. And she's a wonderful comedian, but that was not the time nor the place for her to be. They just reached out and got her and sat her in there. And he never got the treatment he needed. He was not phased out of it, like he didn't get an accident or didn't get sick or something. And so he was no longer in it. Just one day he was there and one day he wasn't.
They only had 5 episodes of the royal family filmed or shot when completed when Redd Foxx died. It did get good reviews, but unfortunately, it didn't make. They didn't make many more episodes after Redd Foxx passed away. The show was canceled a week before the broadcast of the first season was scheduled to end. So 2 episodes have never been aired of the royal family. So Redd Foxx, a very, very funny man, buried at Palm Memorial Park in Las Vegas. He died at the age of 68 on October 11th, 1991. A great quote I've read of his: I've had my share of hard luck and tragedies, but I feel damn lucky. So there you are, Redd Foxx's final moments. The fact that he died on the Paramount lot and they revived him and they brought him to Hollywood Presbyterian. And that soundstage, on soundstage 31, there's 2 relevant ghosts that you hear mentioned a lot on the Paramount soundstage. One of them is Heather O'Rourke from the Poltergeist movies, because she filmed an episode or 2 of Happy Days. And I don't know why they say she haunts that soundstage at Paramount. But the other one is Redd Foxx, who technically died once on the lot, was revived, and they brought him back to the hospital. But in fact, I did an episode of The Doctors a couple of years ago, and I told them about that on the air, and they just didn't want to know it.
But I really love what you're doing. I think you're bringing people to life even after they're dead.
Really cool. And Scott, I have a really important question for you that affects all of us who work here. You said that the Paramount lot is haunted.
No.
You said it's haunted. We're scaring Dr. Travis and
Don't go
myself.
there. Oh, no.
But please tell us why you think it's haunted and why Dr. Travis and I and Dr. Orden cannot be here after sunset.
Here on stage, a lot went on here. I mean, I think the spirits are Godfather, I Love Lucy, Manic, Soul Train.
Redd
a lot
Foxx,
of stuff happened
Redd
right
Foxx
here.
died on this lot, and Heather O'Rourke from Happy Day, well, Poltergeist, she haunts the soundstage across the street. But we are literally right now on cemetery property, former cemetery property, because Hollywood Cemetery, which is just over the other side of the wall, it used to be twice as big as it is right now.
There was just a gust of wind that went by. No, I'm kidding.
In the early 19-teens, the cemetery was literally cut in half and sold, and this half was cemetery property at one point.
So how shall we protect ourselves?
Just be nice.
Just be nice? Wish them well if we see them around the corridor at night? Okay.
So there's no doubt, all kinds of ghosts around there. I've seen them, because I lived right across the street from Paramount, so I've seen all kinds of funky stuff in there. But anyway, getting off target. So Redd Foxx is buried in a very modest grave, and his mom, who died about 2 years after he did, is buried next to him. So rest in peace, Redd Foxx. You were a funny, funny man.
Well, listen, Esther, why don't you start helping us out in the kitchen?
All right.
You can start by sticking your face in the freezer and making us some ugly sickles.
You heard me.